you have a fascinating
Yeah.
story. I'd love you to fill our audience in on how you created a data science consultancy from scratch yourself,
Cool.
having the confidence to do that. It's a really, like, I'm sure there's tons of listeners out there who have thought,
Yeah.
I wonder what it would be like if I left the comfort of my employer and tried doing data science on my own. So
Yeah.
yeah, fill us in on how that went, how it all came about.
So there's lots of fun twists and turns that we can dive into later, but the story in a nutshell is I was actually studying computational neuroscience at Case Western, and I was dealing with a lot of the application of mathematics and data, and had an internship with a health system where I was looking at public health data, and that was my very first entry into the world of data science. I was encouraged after demonstrating some of my undergraduate research at a research showcase to consider commercializing. I had no idea that one could say, I want to start a business. So the Entrepreneurship Center, they showed me how to file an LLC. I take this big giant leap into this, knowing nothing. Raised some money, got into an accelerator, and this thing falls flat in about a year and a half. And I can talk about all the lessons I learned about not selling data science the right way. But an interesting outcome of this is we had some research pilots with hospital systems. And I was trying to get them to sign these agreements to say they'll eventually buy this software. And in return, I was doing free research for them. And so when that first startup collapsed, some of these researchers were upset. They're like, we were depending on this work. And it was funny to me because I asked the question, I'm like, wait, you would pay for this? And so it turns out all along, the thing I was giving away for free was actually this growing, booming demand. And so to give you a snapshot in time, this is the end of 2015, the start of 2016. That's the birth of Pandata. In Northeast Ohio, where I'm based, there were fewer than 150 data scientists at that point in time. And about a third of them worked for IBM, the Cleveland Clinic, or Progressive Insurance, household names for many people. And then these massive enterprises based here had like one or two. So I started Pandata to address this talent gap. And over time, Pandata grew bootstrapped painfully by focusing on what was hard to cultivate. So as data analytics platforms and business intelligence became more commoditized, it became machine learning. As machine learning started to get commoditized, it became machine learning in heavily regulated environments. And that's ultimately how we found our niche. And after growing that business and surviving the pandemic for about 8 years, completely bootstrapped, we were acquired almost a year ago this month by a company called Further. And that's where I'm now their head of AI and data science. Love to tell you about all of that, but that's my story in a nutshell.
Yeah, let's dig into some of these things in more detail. That was a really great summary. It's amazing that you delivered that so concisely. It's like 8 years of your life distilled
Well,
into just a few minutes, which is nice.
there's something to that. So you kind of talked about this whole like, why am I so positive all the time? I'm actually a very grumpy person when it comes to certain things. I'm like, no, we're not going to analyze the data that way. But I found early on with Pandata that when I was selling data science, most people didn't know what data science was. It was like a salt shaker. It's like, hey, can we sprinkle some data science on it and maybe some money is going to come out on the other side? And it was this novelty, and most people didn't understand what this thing was. And a lot of data scientists at the time were leaning into being smart, being very technical, working on the algorithms that were the next greatest thing, that they actually liked it when other people didn't understand what they did. And
Right.
on the other hand, I really wanted to find ways for people to get it, because I found that when they get it, they were a lot more likely to work with us, stick with us longer. That ultimately became one of the core values that I built Pandata around and the type of people that I hired. And so my motto over the years evolved into make it boring. And if I can use cats and dogs and puppies and weird little memes to explain a very complicated mathematical concept, you bet I will. And people love it. It's fun. It can be easy. It can be funny. And people go, wow, that was easy. So that's become a big part of how I do things.
I like that you, in the same breath, described it as making it boring while simultaneously having cat memes. It seems like you're making it more interesting, but I know
Yeah,
what you
fair
mean, that
enough.
you're making it like less technical, less the data scientist isn't going to feel like, wow, this is,
Yeah.
they're not going to be seeing all the equations that make them excited. It's making it boring for data scientists and making it
Yeah.
exciting for everyone else.
Exactly. I had the same reaction from a class I gave recently, and they're like, that wasn't boring at all. I'm like, but you now understand how boring AI is. And they go, yep. And I'm like, that's the point.